You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Together, we will discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. My name is Sebastian Calmes. I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a wellness specialist with UKHR Health and Wellness. Welcome to 2025. We got a great episode here for you today. We're going to be covering financial wellness, personal finance basics, and how it relates to mindfulness, happiness, and maybe we can debunk some financial myths. To talk with me about this topic today is Dr. Bruce Ross. Bruce, thanks so much for being on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Sebastian. I'm excited to be here.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about your role here at UK?
I'm an associate professor in the Family Sciences Department here at UK. I'm also the program director for the Family Financial Counseling undergraduate major and the program director for the Graduate Certificate in Financial Therapy.
Nice. And how did you land here at UK?
Well, that's a long story. I grew up in a very family finance-oriented family. My original trajectory through college was in finances and economics, but I shift about halfway through going towards the therapy route. And so then got a master's in marriage and family therapy, but as I was seeing clients and doing therapy, I realized we kept coming back to issues around money. And the stresses, the relational issues, the emotional issues, the communication problems around money. I switched gears a little bit and went for a doctorate in financial therapy through a marriage and family therapy program, but also took financial counseling and planning courses through that curriculum as well. I got a doctorate in marriage and family therapy, but with a specialization in financial therapy and with a focus with financial counseling and planning. So a long way to say, I really want to help families be better with money.
And finances is like one of those biggest, most common causes of...
Absolutely. It's still the number one reported reason for divorce and separation. It's still the biggest issue that comes up. It's one of the main conflict areas that comes up in relationships and for families and for emerging adults. I think what's interesting is even research has shown, even when it's not the top issue, it's still the most pervasive, most reoccurring, most constant or consistent issue.
It's really important to master personal finance.
Absolutely. Extremely passionate about people mastering their personal finance.
Financial well-being is one of the 8 dimensions of well-being recognized by the University of Kentucky Human Resources. Why do you think listeners should care about their financial health? Do you think financial health is something that impacts all dimensions of well-being? It sounds like you touched on that a little bit, where it was a pervasive factor in all families.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost everything we do is affected by money, from the jobs we have, the education we can get, the food we eat. Research after research, study after study shows finances have pretty direct associations with our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, our relational health. We can't get away with it. So it's something we have to deal with eventually.
Yeah.
My thought is, let's deal with it before it becomes a problem.
As we're coming off the holidays and folks have been spending more on family and friends, like for gifts, how important is a financial reset at the beginning of the year?
I think it can be very important. I guess I'm a little hesitant about reset, because if you've already had a plan in place, if you were in alignment with what your budget was for that year, you don't necessarily have to have a complete reset. But it is always a good time to take stock and think about, what's this next year going to bring? What are the goals we have? One of my big sayings is, all financial goals are life goals. All life goals are really just financial goals. What are the life goals that are coming up over the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years, even the next 5 or 10 years? We can start planning for those, and what are the resources, what are the needs that are going to come into play for those that we do need.
You're really stressing the importance of having a plan, having goals, getting even a budget in place as a bare minimum, because maybe sometimes people don't even have that.
Yeah, budget often has a negative connotation. I've found just saying let's do a budget can become very stressful. I prefer to reframe that as a spending plan. A spending plan of how are we going to spend our money? How are we going to allocate the money and live within our means? But how are we going to spend that in accordance with our goals, our values, our wishes for the year?
I'll see people get a pay increase, then they increase their lifestyle, their spending habits. Then it's like you're never getting ahead. Is there a technical term?
Lifestyle creep.
It's called lifestyle creep. What are your feelings about that?
Oh, it's very common, and it happens to all of us. It happens to the best of us. I can admit it's happened to me occasionally. I think the important thing is to still take stock in what are those goals. Is your goal to increase and go on more date nights or go on more trips or buy more gifts? Is that what really your value is in life? Not your value with money, but what is your value in life? And if that is, then that can be your choice.
Yeah.
But if your goal is to then eventually buy a house or have kids or get married, those big cost items, get another car, maybe have a big family trip or something. We should take stock of what our values are and be in alignment with that. With lifestyle creep, there's this whole keeping up with the Joneses, which was a past generational phrase, and now we have keeping up with the Kardashians. I'm not sure what the new thing is now for the younger generations. There's all these societal pressures with social media we're bombarded with, and we have to really say no.
Yeah.
And what's our focus? What can we do in accordance with our values and spending plan?
I absolutely agree. Personally, I feel like values, that's where everything looks back to. How am I with the people around me? Well, what are my values? How am I with my finances and my money? Well, what are my values? I totally agree. A big component of finance is debt, and a common debt is credit card debt.
Yes.
Credit card bills may be high for some. How should folks approach paying these off if they can't pay it in full immediately? What are some good approaches?
Well, first, if you have credit card debt or significant credit card debt where you can't pay it off in full, I think the first thing we have to do is take a step back and think about or find out how we got to this place. Because that means, to an extent, we've lived beyond our means. We've spent more than we have coming in. We have to take stock of how we got to this point and make a change in our behaviors and our spending habits and realign our budget so that it fits. But if the practical kind of situation here is if that debt is spread across multiple credit cards, we need to make sure we do the minimum across all of those. There's going to be a minimum payment the credit card company is going to ask for. We have to make sure we have the minimum payments so our credit score is not dinged. We don't get a late fee. Now, we will be charged interest on whatever the remaining balance is, but our credit score won't get dinged. Now, the next step then would be to look at whatever credit card has the highest interest rate. From a purely financial perspective, and this is called the avalanche method, we look at what the highest interest rate is, and we put any remaining money towards that first.
So make minimum payments on, say, 3 credit cards, make 3 minimum payments.
Across all
but then
three.
Say one has like 24%.
And one has 18 and one has 16. We're going to put all that extra cash on the 24%.
Okay.
Now, there is also a snowball method, and that's going to cost you a little bit more in the long run, but it has a psychological advantage. So across those 3 cards, instead of looking at the highest interest rate, we look at whatever the lowest amount owed is. If we can pay off one of those credit cards very quickly, it can be a motivating factor to pay off the other ones or can to keep paying it off.
Because you can see the carrot, it's there.
You get a little carrot because you can check off a box, essentially, by checking off the credit card payment. Or finish paying that one credit card and then moving on to the next. It's going to cost you a little bit more because those interest rates might not be in the best alignment for paying it off, like it is in the avalanche method with the highest interest rate, but there can be a psychological benefit to it with checking that box.
I'm actually doing this right now with my student loans. I did a snowball where there was a couple with a low balance I just checked off.
And how did you feel after that?
Well, it snowballed quickly because within maybe 2 or 3 months, I paid off 2 loans.
Nice. Congratulations.
Now I'm switching to Avalanche because there's some 7% or 6%ers. So,
and those higher interest rates keep accruing more debt.
Exactly. But I do have a question where if you have a loan that has a 7% interest rate and the owed amount is like $5,000, then you have another loan that's a lower percentage, but the amount owed is higher than the other one with the higher interest rate.
It's the same principle. One of the things we can fall back on from a purely financial, by the numbers perspective, we can follow the interest rates. Whatever the APR is, not the simple interest rate, but the APR, which includes your interest rate and any fees.
What are some concerns about only making minimum payments on credit cards or even student loans?
It's going to take a really long time to pay it off, and you're going to pay more and more interest over the course of those years. A lot of the minimum payments, especially for a lot of private student loans, are set up so it takes 10, 20, 30, 40 years to pay off. In that kind of situation, you might be paying 3, 4, 5, 6 times the actual loan amount. The faster we can pay that down, the faster we can make a plan to just cut expenses in other areas, maybe increase income in some other area, and pay that off as fast as possible, because interest works for us when we invest. Interest kills us for our debt. It works for the other companies. It works the same way for them like it does for our investments. Basically, we're an investment for them.
How much income should we ideally save each month or year?
That's a great question. It's not so much as a specific money number. What I like and what the kind of general rule of thumb, and I'm going to go through a lot of just general rules of thumb. I do want to preface, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation, but these rules of thumb help us center around a benchmark for ourselves. Each of your own unique situations might differ a little bit, but as a general rule of thumb, we should be looking at a percentage. 20% of every paycheck. 20% of every paycheck should go into not just savings, but investments. For retirement, specifically only for retirement. We have this concept of we need to save for retirement. Saving is not going to get us there. You put your money into a savings account, and you're getting maybe 0.1% interest. We have to invest for retirement. If we're looking at how much we save out of every paycheck, then we need to build an emergency fund and a solid foundation first, and then invest 20% of every paycheck we get. It doesn't matter if we make $2,000 a month or $10,000 a month, or there's some very fortunate people making $50,000 a month. It is 20%. That doesn't change. Even when you get a raise at work, like you mentioned, putting 20% of that into your retirement accounts as well. Then, after that, this goes back to what are your life goals? What do you need to save for in the next years? Are you planning on getting married? Are you planning on having kids? Are you planning on buying a house? Or is there a big trip? Whatever that is, then we need to put money aside and save or invest for that.
Absolutely. And before we save the 20%, it sounds like we should have an emergency fund in place.
Yes.
What's the numbers or percentage with that? Or how do you find out how much somebody should have in their emergency nest egg?
So again, this varies, but the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months of salary or income that comes in after taxes. But this also is for emergencies. We have to take stock and realize what are the emergencies we have that can come up in life. If you are a homeowner already, what are the emergencies with your home? I'll give you a quick example. 2021, probably because we were at home with the pandemic, we're using utilities and stuff a lot more. Within the span of about 6 months, I had 2 AC units break.
Oh,
I had a water tank break. I had a freezer break. I had a garbage disposal break. And I had my sub pump break. All of that was about 15 grand in 6 months. I thought I was just the unluckiest person in the world. And it could have been a product of just being home, using the stuff more. But we also have to realize all the utilities and stuff we have in our house, those are going to have to be replaced pretty much every 10 to 15 years. That's their lifespan. If you buy a house when they were all bought together, which they commonly are, it's reasonable for them all to break somewhat at the same time. We have to plan around that for our emergencies.
And it's really important to have cash for those expenses, because that could become a credit card debt.
Or having to take out another type of high interest loan or something for it. Or go without. Go without an AC unit. Or I could probably get away with going without a garbage disposal.
Yeah.
Or maybe even going without a freezer or something for a portion of time.
Yeah.
But these emergencies do come up. Car wrecks happen. Look at the forest fires out in California right now, and all the homes burning. Even when they do have fire insurance, those claims are going to take 2 to 4 years to pay out. What are the circumstances? People still haven't been paid out for some of the flooding that's happened here in western and eastern Kentucky, even when they did have insurance for specific flood damage. What are the scenarios where the emergencies are likely to come up with, and might be more than 3 months' salary? But also, what's the biggest emergency? Complete loss of our income. We lose our job, we can't do our job because of health issues or something, or family issues. So what's the likelihood we're going to be able to get another job?
Because you said 3 to 6 months of your income, not of like your monthly expenses or bills, because I've heard sometimes where it was 3 to 6 months of expenses or bills.
And that is another rule of thumb we can use. In building up, we can use for emergencies, it can be 3 to 6 months of expenses. And we can use all expenses depending on the person. We can use just minimal expenses. So just basic food, basic utilities. We're not going out. Kids are pulled from their extracurriculars. We're not shopping anymore, that kind of thing. We're not going out to eat. Or we could have 3 to 6 months of maintaining living. But if it's 3 to 6 months of your expenses, that's generally about 3 to 6 months of your income as well, which is why they get used interchangeably a lot. It's based off of your personal preferences, how much you want to cut if crises happen. And if you lose your income, how long is it going to take for you to get another job? There are lots of professions. You can lose your job and you can go out, and the likelihood that if you're good at what you do, you can get another job relatively quickly in kind of the same industry. You look at professors that might not have the security of tenure yet, or I know when I went out on the job market and got my job here at UK, there were, in my specialization, 4 openings in the entire country.
Wow.
I've never seen more than 8 openings in my area in a given year.
Yeah.
Which means it's a lot tougher for me if I was to lose my job or unable to do my job to find another one. And it definitely means relocating to most likely a whole nother state. Then that would have to be accounted for in an emergency fund. Again, 3 to 6 months is a rule of thumb, but it's what's your specific needs, what are your preferences as well, and then go up from there.
Essentially, we need to pay attention to what am I going to need for emergency money.
Absolutely. And not just you, your family.
When we're building our emergency fund, where should we put that? Because I have a feeling we probably shouldn't put it under our mattress.
Oh, definitely not under the mattress, not in the back of the closet. The standard place most people keep an emergency fund is just a separate savings account. Opening up with your local branch and a bank or a credit union, you can easily do that. Typically, I would recommend an online-only savings account. They're typically going to earn you a little bit more interest instead of a brick and mortar where you actually can go into a place and they're paying for all that upkeep of the location, the personnel, and all of the effort that takes. They're typically only giving you maybe a 0.1% interest rate, which is very low. You're not earning anything. It's not necessarily a point of the emergency fund, but if we can make a little bit more money, why wouldn't we? But the online banks and bankrate.com is a nice service that gives you the best savings account rates. They give you the best rates for a lot of different banking services. But an online savings account will often give you 1%, which is 10 times the amount. Still not a whole lot, but it's 10 times the amount of interest you would be earning in a brick and mortar. And also because it's online, there's this psychological effect that I can't just go in and just take the money. It's there in case I need it. And then I have to transfer it out or get a check mailed to me to actually use it, or transfer it into another account so I can use it. And generally with most emergencies, you have time to sort it out. Even if you have to pay that emergency on your credit card, you still have the 30 days to sort it out. What I also do too is a lot of brokerage accounts. If you have a standard brokerage account, they have money market funds that are associated with it. To put it in very basic terms, it's like a savings account with your brokerage account. Often it can even have a little bit of a higher interest rate where I've seen 1.5%, 2%, even 3%.
But these accounts are typically more safe than the stock market.
Yes. Essentially, they'll take that money and they'll put it in, and it's technically invested in other money, to put it very simply. But it stays there, it earns a little bit more interest, and it's more of that out of sight, out of mind until you need it.
Gotcha. Okay, emergency fund, first priority, and then 20% of your income into retirement investments. Where do we go from there after 20% into retirement investments? What's generally recommended?
When we're thinking about 20% into retirement investments, we're thinking about putting it into a couple of different accounts. Typically, if your employer has a retirement account, such as a 401k or like we have here at a university, a 403b, they're essentially the same thing, but they are retirement accounts that are tax deferred, which means we don't have to pay taxes now as we invest. It comes straight out of our paycheck before taxes, and then we can invest it in a series of different types of funds. We can choose based off of what's allowed for us. That's set up by our employer and their brokerage they're using. But often with that, we have matching. And that's really the value of an employer retirement account is that matching.
Especially at UK.
Especially at UK.
Yeah.
We have a 2-to-1 matching here at UK. So if we put in 5%, they put in an additional 10%, which is an automatic 200% return.
Yeah.
You were never going to get that guarantee
It's
in
incredible.
the market.
Going off your recommendations, we would only have to put out another 5% to hit that 20% mark.
Yes. Into our retirement accounts.
Yeah.
Now, what I generally suggest as a rule of thumb, now you can maximize that. You can put that other 5% into your 401k if you want. But as an alternative, we have what's called a Roth IRA or a Roth individual retirement account. And that is funded with post-tax dollars. We've already paid taxes on it. And so we can invest up to $7,000 a year, or currently this year. It goes up a little bit every year. We invest money into that account, and we have full access to the whole market to invest in. And the beauty is we don't pay taxes. You can...
Because it's post-tax.
Because it's post-tax. We've already paid taxes on it. It's a retirement account, and it will grow all the way. And as long as we don't withdraw, there's a few exceptions, such as medical emergencies, buying your first house kind of thing. But as long as we don't withdraw any of the profit we've earned in that account until 59 and a half, which is approaching retirement age, we get all of that tax-free. So I would put up to your matching, whatever your matching is, into your employer's retirement account. Then maximize your Roth IRA.
Yeah.
If you still haven't met that 20%, well, one, congrats, you're doing really well. You have a great salary. Then you might have to fund it into a standard brokerage account, which is taxable every time you sell and you make a profit. But you should be having one of those as well for any of those big purchases that are coming up in the long term. If you're planning to buy a house in the next 10 years, you might be putting money into a standard brokerage account to start growing that money a little bit at a faster pace. And generally that rule of thumb is if you're going to use the money within 3 to 5 years, you shouldn't invest it in the market.
How about extra cash? Should they focus that money on debt, retirement, or investments? What would you do with that?
Well, again, let's follow the interest rates. What are the highest interest rates? If you have high interest rate debt, like credit card debt, make sure we pay that off. Now, I do want to caution that's not an excuse to just spend more on the credit card because you have extra cash and now I'm telling you to pay that high interest debt off. So we don't want to fall into that cycle. But if we already have this high interest debt through student loans, through maybe a bad car loan with a high interest debt, I've seen some of those car loans be 12 or 16%, then we might want to pay that off quicker. But if we have a lower interest rate, that's only 2 or 3%, then historically speaking, we could probably get more in investments. Historically speaking, if you were invested in, say, like a general S&P 500 fund or mutual fund or ETF, even better, which is just a fund that groups basically the 500 largest publicly traded companies together, and you get to buy little portions of each of those stocks for each of those companies. That's going to generally, historically speaking, there are no guarantees in life or in the market, but that's going to average you a return of 7 to 12%.
Say you had a loan and it was a 3% loan, but you have another investment that is returning, say, 5 to 7%, something more than 3%. You're suggesting you could put that extra cash into the investment, but continue to make the minimum payments on the 3% loan, because over time you will still come out with more money because the return on the investment is larger than 3%.
Yes. Now, that's the rule of thumb. That's by the numbers. That's the personal finance kind of approach. But again, it depends on your own personal preferences. If you have a psychological effect of stress, where there's debt just hanging over your shoulder, or I've heard clients in the past say there's just this black cloud of debt that just hangs over me that I constantly think about, or it's in the back of my mind, then absolutely, if it's causing stress in your life, pay off that debt faster. Again, it depends on your own personal preferences as well. There's the saying by one of my old professors at the University of Georgia, Dr. Joe Getz, and he says, when the right answer is wrong.
When the right answer's wrong?
When it's wrong for you. If the right answer might be to follow the interest rates and investing that money so you can earn more in the long run. But if you're constantly stressed out about having or holding some debt, and it's affecting the rest of your life, then that by the numbers answer might be wrong for you. Then do what's right for you and in accordance with your values.
That's a great piece of wisdom, because sometimes the right answer is wrong. What is, if any, the difference between bad debt and good debt? What advice would you give to folks struggling with debt?
Yeah, this concept comes up a lot. So what is good debt? What is bad debt? And there's a lot of financial gurus out there that say all debt is bad. You should never have any debt. But essentially our economy, our society is still based off of debt. What I mean by that, it's based off of credit, which is just a form of debt. It might be revolving or a limited amount of debt, but it's based off of debt. Traditionally, what is good debt is debt you are taking on for a specific purpose, with intentionality, that you have a plan for, and is within your means. Often this includes buying a house, buying a car for transportation to work, taking on student loans, but all of it is still intentional. It's still within your means. You're not buying a McMansion if that's not what you can afford. And you will always qualify for more than you can afford for a car loan. You will always qualify for more than you can afford for a home loan.
Because they want you to take the loan.
They want you to take the money. They don't care if you struggle or not. We have to do our own due diligence right there. And we have to say what is going to be good for us. And then taking on that debt to help our life, help our lifestyle, but it has to be within our plan, within our spending plan, within our goals, and within our means. Bad debt is pretty much everything else. We can take out student loans, but if we have a plan of where we're going and the career trajectory, we're going to be able to pay off those student loans, and we're not taking out too much student loans. I know of lawyers that go to law school and they take out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, even more than what they need to, just to show, hey, I'm the doctor, I'm the lawyer, so I'm going to live it up a little bit more. And so they're taking on tremendous amounts of debt they don't really need. And then their plan is to then go into maybe smaller practices or public service where they might not be earning enough to really pay off those debts. And that can be said about any major. Any major can be profitable and it can be within your means, but you have to have a plan and structure around that.
Well, that's a fresh approach for me, because typically what I've heard is good and bad debt is based on asset class or what it is. For example, a house could be called a hard asset. You could sell it. It's like an investment property. Whereas a student loan, the asset is yourself, but you don't sell yourself in the same way you sell a house.
Essentially, you still are. You're building what's called human capital in yourself. You're raising your own capital. Through a college, university like UK, you're making lots of contacts and networking. So you're building also social capital. You're building two types of capital for yourself, going through and using that tuition to build that capital. But with a house, you're building a hard asset. You're building something that you could sell, but that's presuming the market doesn't crash, or you're not underwater where you owe more than the house is worth, or you don't go into debt by where you get into a situation or emergency crisis arises and you can't pay your mortgage and then it gets foreclosed on and you have to still pay a lot of that debt back. Again, a house is good when it's intentional and in your means and within your spending plan.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this 2-part finance conversation with Dr. Bruce Ross. Thank you for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient. This podcast is brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. We offer a wide range of online and in-person services to support the well-being of UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. You can find experts in mental health, personal resilience, nutrition, and physical activity. We're ready to meet you where you are and address your unique needs. To learn more about the work, life, and well-being services offered by UK Human Resources, visit hr.uky.edu/wellbeing. You can also connect with us on social media and YouTube by searching @UKY Wellness or by email at healthandwellness@uky.edu.